Hello, everyone. Today we're going to be going through Judges, chapters 3 through 5. And when we left off last time together, Othniel had just died. Othniel being the first judge. And, you know, and just, as we've already spoken about, the judges, there are 12 judges, and I think 13. We'll see as we kind of go along here. I've counted 12, but then there seems to be 13. So anyway, we'll discover that together as we go along. But with the judges, what there is, we see this again, that pattern of sin, and then within inside of the sin, then there's the servitude, and then they're in supplication or calling out to God, and then God redeems and delivers. And then it's just a matter of a period of time how much there were in each category. So, for instance, with Othniel, had been in servitude for I think 40 years. I'm sorry, no, they'd been in servitude for 8 years, and then they were in rest for 40 years with Othniel. And now getting into the next judge, it says in verse 12, and the children of Israel again did evil in the sight of the Lord. So the Lord strengthened Eglon, king of Moab, against Israel because they had done evil in the sight of the Lord. Then he gathered to himself the people of Ammon and Amalek, went and defeated Israel, and took possession of the city of palms. Remember, the city of palms is Jericho. So the children of Israel served Eglon, king of Moab, 18 years. So now we're seeing a servitude of 18 years. Some things of note here as well is that remember with Moab and Ammon, the that's basically that's from Lot. So when Lot had children with his two daughters, it's Moab and Ammon respectively there. So that's who that's who's taking over right now, and that's who the children of Israel are in servitude to. But it says, here we are with the supplication in verse 15. But when the children of Israel cried out to the Lord raised up a deliverer for them, Ehud, the son of Gera, the Benjamite, a left-handed man. So Othniel, the first judge, had been I believe was from the tribe of Judah. And then now here we're seeing a Benjamite being raised up. Let me check that real quick. Yep. I tell you what, I'll do a little reading on that last time. You can too as well to see what tribe Othniel came from. I believe it was Judah. Okay, so and it says, so Ehud had been risen up by God, and by him the children of Israel sent tribute to Eglon, king of Moab. And what we read here in this next section is, so there's this tribute. So they're in servitude. So this tribute is having to be paid by the children of Israel to the king of Moab, and so that's what they're doing. They've gone to the king to pay tribute, and after finishing paying tribute, Ehud requests to be alone with the king, and he gets his request. And then Ehud, it says and then verse 20, I have a message from God for you. So he rose from his seat. Then Ehud reached with his left hand, took the dagger from his right thigh, and thrust it into his belly. Even the hilt went in after the blade, and the fat closed over the blade, for he did not draw the dagger out of his belly. And even grosser than that, his entrails came out. Then Ehud went out through the porch and shut the doors of the upper room behind him and locked them. So ultimately, Ehud escapes, and it says he escapes to Serah in verse 26. And so then when he gets there, he blows the trumpet in the mountains of Ephraim, and the children of Israel go down with him from the mountains, and he leads them. So now, basically, this what's the word? They've gained power again under Ehud, and so they go down. They seize the fords of the Jordan, leading to Moab. And it says that, so they go into war with the people of Moab in verse 29. And at that time, they killed about 10,000 men of Moab, all stout men of valor. Not a man escaped. So Moab was subdued that day under the hand of Israel, and the land had rest for 80 years. So the land had rest for 80 years, and then we see this short snippet of Shamgar. Not much is known about this guy in verse 31. So after Ehud, the next judge was Shamgar, and the son of Anath, who killed 600 men of the Philistines with an ox goad, and he also delivered Israel. And then chapter 4 is Deborah. So Deborah ends up being the next judge, and she was a woman, and in a sense, it makes you question where all the men were, what was going on. So we see, a declension here because it's not a pattern of the Bible, or it's not a pattern of how God raises people up and appoints those who leads. It's not a pattern for women to be in that position. But here, Deborah certainly is, and she does a good job at it. But lingering on the heels of that again is that question of, where are the men? Why are there no men rising up as leaders during this time period? So when Ehud was dead, it says, verse 1, chapter 4, the children of Israel again did evil in the sight of the Lord. So the Lord sold them into the hand of Jabin, king of Canaan, who reigned in Hazor. The commander of his army was Sisera, who dwelt in Harosheth and Hagoyim. And the children of Israel cried out to the Lord, for Jabin had 900 chariots of iron, and for 20 years he had harshly oppressed the children of Israel. Pointing out these chariots of iron here, that's a big deal, because what that shows archaeologically and historically in the times of metals, a lot of the people at this time only had bronze. Even the children of Israel were using bronze and just getting into iron. So here's a guy in the land of Canaan who had 900 chariots of iron. So a really strong force. And Deborah says, verse 4, now Deborah, a prophetess, the wife of Lapidoth, was judging Israel at that time, and she would sit under the palm tree of Deborah between Ramah and Bethel in the mountains of Ephraim. And the children of Israel came up to her for judgment. So she sends for this guy by the name of Barak, who's the son of Abinoam from Kadesh and Naphtali. So this sends for Barak from Naphtali, basically wanting to appoint him to lead the charge. And Deborah tells Barak, has not the Lord of Israel commanded, go deploy troops at Mount Tabor, take with you 10,000 men of the sons of Naphtali and the sons of Zebulun, and against you I will deploy Sisera, the commander of Jabin's army, with his chariots and his multitude at the river Kishon, and I will deliver him into your hand. And Barak said to her, if you will go with me, then I will go, but if you will not go with me, I will not go. So Barak is telling Deborah, hey, the only way I'm going to go is if you go with me. Even though, God has promised to deliver Sisera into Israel's hands. And Deborah tells him, hey, I'll go with you, but if I do, I'm going to get the credit for this victory. And also in verse 9, she says, I will surely go with you. Nevertheless, there will be no glory for you in the journey you are taking, for the Lord will sell Sisera into the hand of a woman. So right now she's saying that Sisera is going to be delivered into the hand of a woman, and we're going to see this come to fruition and later in this chapter. And so she does. She goes with Barak, and there's this report of to Sisera, of what's going on, that they're coming against Sisera. So Sisera comes in. Let's see. So they go to battle in verse 14. Deborah says to Barak, up, for this is the day in which the Lord has delivered Sisera into your hand. Has not the Lord gone out before you? So Barak goes down from Mount Tabor with the 10,000 men, and then Sisera ends up fleeing, and so they're chasing Sisera, and then Sisera ends up in the tent of Jael, this lady's tent, who's the wife of Heber the Kenite. And remember, the Kenites, these were the desert nomadic people. And so Sisera is now in the tent of Jael. Jael goes out to meet him and says, hey, turn aside, my lord. Turn aside to me. Do not fear. And when he turned aside with her into the tent, she covered him with a blanket. So she's taking care of Sisera inside of her tent. He's asking for water to drink. She brings him milk. And also he says to her, hey, stand at the door of the tent. And if any man comes in and inquires of you, you will ask the question, is there any man here? Or if they ask the question, if any man's here, you shall say no. When he's asleep, Jael, Heber's wife, takes a tent peg and a hammer and drives it right through his temple. So That fulfills verse 9 where Deborah had said that the Lord will sell Sisera into the hand of a woman. And then, and when Barak, who had been in pursuit of Sisera, came to Jael, Jael tells him, "Come in and I'll show you the man who you seek." So on that day, God subdued Jabin, king of Canaan, in the presence of the children of Israel, and the hand of the children of Israel grew stronger and stronger against Jabin, king of Canaan, until they had destroyed Jabin, king of Canaan. And then chapter 5 is the Song of Deborah, and really, really a beautiful prose here. Just this song, and there's some clues in here that we see from this song. In verse 6 of chapter 5, in the middle of verse 6, it says, "The highways were deserted." And so when the highways were deserted, as the people are moving along, what that is pointing to is it's speaking to the conditions of the time. I mean, no one felt safe. People would, stay in their homes. And also when they traveled, in verse 6 too, it says, "And the travelers walked along the byways." So they wouldn't take the common routes until, and it says, verse 7, "Village life ceased. It ceased in Israel until I, Deborah, arose." So now with her judgment, and them defeating those around them, and they're being at rest for a time period, reestablishing some of the safety. And then in verse 8, they chose new gods. This points to them being given to idols. And then also in verse 8, not a shield or a spear was seen among the 40,000 in Israel, so they didn't even have any weapons. And then later in verse 14, it talks about who the tribes that helped Deborah in battle. It talked about Ephraim, Benjamin, Machir, which is the tribe of Manasseh, Zebulun, Issachar. They all had helped Deborah in battle. And then there were some of those that would not go, like Reuben and Gilead and Dan and Asher. And she's basically calling them out, where were you? And then with Zebulun and Naphtali, they were they fought valiantly. It says in verse 19, in reference to Zebulun and Naphtali, "The kings came and fought, and the kings of Canaan fought in Tanakh by the waters of Megiddo. They took no spoils of silver. They fought from the heavens, the stars from their courses fought against Sisera." So they didn't even want any of the spoils of war. And then 23, "Curse Meroz, curse its inhabitants bitterly, because they did not come to help." So read that song of Deborah, and then at the end, the mother of Sisera, it shows her. She's looking out the window, imagining her son to come back, and the one of the ladies that were with her, she was trying to comfort her and painting this picture of Sisera winning these wars and finding and dividing the spoil and finding a man, or to every man a girl or two, plundering these dyed garments of embroidered, these embroidered garments that are dyed. But we know what happened. He's had a stake driven through his temple. 31, "Thus let all your enemies perish, O Lord, but let those who love him be like the sun when it comes out in full strength." So the land had rest for 40 years. And then chapter 6 here, the Midianites, so they right on the hills of Deborah and Barak, the land it said had rest for 40 years at the end of chapter 5. And now Israel's going to be in service to Midian for 7 years. And that's what we see in chapter 6, is the Midianites have the children of Israel in servitude for 7 years. And because of the Midianites, it says in verse 2, "The children of Israel made for themselves the dens, the caves, and the strongholds which are in the mountains." So it must have been pretty rough, because they were literally hiding out from the Midianites. And verse 6, "So Israel was greatly impoverished because of the Midianites, and the children of Israel cried out to the Lord." So servitude for 7 years, we're right into the supplication. And then verse 7, "And it came to pass when the children of Israel cried out to the Lord because of the Midianites, that the Lord sent a prophet to the children of Israel." Thus says the Lord God of Israel, I brought you up from Egypt and brought you out of the house of bondage, and I delivered you out of the hand of the Egyptians and out of the hand of all who oppressed you, and drove them out before you and gave you their land. Also I said to you, I am the Lord your God. Do not fear the gods of the Amorites in whose lands you dwell, but you have not obeyed my voice. Next time together, we'll see Gideon risen up. Till then, God bless.